Hello everyone, it's pretty much the end of summer, end of October at the moment. Not going to be doing too much cutting, so I've decided to check the valve clearances on my machine. I've already made a video on exactly how to determine your valve clearances, but this video is just like a recap of the whole thing, but primarily is to find out if any of those valve clearances have changed, if they've been altered over the last 4 months since I did it last. So enjoy the video. And so before I carry on with the video, I'd just like to introduce you to Mr. Chicken. He's a little turtle dove that actually just arrived here one day and sat on my head, and he's never left. I can be working in the garden, I can be fixing my car, I can be working on a machine, I can walk through the house, and he normally sits on my head. Come on, up you get. There we go. And he's just stayed. He's one of the family now. So I'm sure you're going to see him before the end of the video again. In various places on the machine, in this case right over there, you can see all the details. On the other side of the machine, it's also got the model number, and if you don't have that, you can look somewhere on the engine and you'll find what sort of motor it is. So either in the manufacturer's manual or else in the Briggs & Stratton manual, you will find the valve clearances for the intake and the exhaust valve. And if you go online, Briggs & Stratton valve clearances, you can actually find it there as well. So before I take this cover off, I'm just going to raise the front of the machine so that the oil will flow backwards. If Mr. Chicken will just get off here. Come. Then I can release the brake and clamp it. And now I'm going to be taking off the exhaust. Not absolutely essential, but it's just for the demonstration. And I'm going to put an old cloth in here, old t-shirt, just to catch any oil that might be coming out. And now I can take out take off the cover. And taking off the cover, there shouldn't be too much oil in there because everything is drained to the back. Just a little bit. As you can see, I have two valves here. One's the inlet and one's the exhaust valve. They both have different measurements. The inlet is 5 thousandths and the clearance on the exhaust valve is 7 thousandths. And you might ask yourself which one is the inlet and which one is the exhaust. And I'm going to show you a method so you can determine which is which. The first thing you have to do is understand how a 4-stroke engine works. First of all, as you can see on the drawing behind Mr. Chicken, there's the intake stroke, the compression stroke, the power stroke, and the exhaust stroke. With the intake stroke, the intake valve opens and air and fuel are drawn into the cylinder. Then with the compression stroke, the piston is forced upwards, both valves close, and there is ignition of the air and fuel. Then with the power stroke, the piston goes down, and then with the exhaust stroke it is forced upwards and the exhaust valve opens and the exhaust gas leaves the cylinder. So when the piston moves upwards, it causes a lot of pressure in the cylinder, and as soon as that exhaust valve opens, the exhaust gas is forcibly ejected, and if we put our finger on the exhaust hole, we should be able to feel that pressure being released, and then we know that the engine is on its 4th stroke. After that, we have to find out, after that the piston will go down, and when it returns to the top, both valves are closed, and that's when you take your valve clearance measurements on both valves. So now the spark plug has been replaced, and I'm going to put my finger into the exhaust hole, and I'm going to turn the engine, and as soon as the piston rises to the top and forces the exhaust gas out of the side, you'll be able to hear it. So if you go back to that diagram, you will see that the piston is at the top of its exhaust stroke. So the next time I turn the engine over, the inlet valve should be opening, which it does. That is the bottom one, that's the inlet. It lets the air and gas mixture in. Then the piston comes up right to the very top of the compression stroke, and when it's at the top, both these valves should be closed, and that is when you take your valve clearance measurement. So now I'm going to check the inlet valve clearance first, which is the bottom one, and I'm putting this on at 5 thousandths, and it goes in quite nice and snugly. Now I've put my feeler gauge on 7 thousandths, and I'm going to do the exhaust valve, and there's no ways that will actually get in there. So if you look carefully, you have a nut on the outside. It's an adjusting nut, and in the center is a locking torque screw. So now I'm going to loosen the adjusting nut. I'm going to put my feeler gauge in there and tighten it up a little bit until it's quite snug. I'm going to hold the nut in place and then tighten the screw. Double check afterwards. Still perfect. So as you can see, after 4 months of work, the exhaust valve changed from 7,000 down to 5,000. Another way of doing your valve clearances is to turn the engine until one of the valves is completely open, such as the exhaust is now, and when it's right at the very bottom of its movement, then you can check the inlet. Then turn the engine a little bit further, wait till the inlet valve is completely open, and then check the exhaust valve. So now everything's been put back together, and I'm just going to go out and start her up and see how she runs.